we're focusing on the top 10 long-range meta weapons. There's a few different things we'll talk about throughout the video, so if there's certain questions you have, they'll probably be covered in the video, but I'll go ahead and talk a little bit about one of the biggest issues with the game, and that's some of the visual shake. Even if we do a full build, which is 100% for recoil control, it still has a little bit of the visual shake instead of the actual recoil. Obviously, the recoil with this gun goes up and to the right. It has that little sharp bend in it. You can adjust for the recoil patterns. Very often, you kind of just hold down. When it adjusts, then you make that adjustment. You kind of learn what the recoil pattern is when you start using the weapon. Visual shake, though, this is something that they continue to scale down all through last year. MW3 kind of helped out with that, but a lot of those changes reverted, and that's kind of led to some of the issues we have with the current meta. When we look at the overall TTK of the spreadsheet for the long range meta is just on this side. Obviously, TTK is not everything. You still have the recoil component, the various damage range drop off. So we'll be diving into a few of those different things to kind of help you identify what are some of those best and kind of how I chose what I think are some of the best weapons currently within the game. What gun can you be most consistent at? How does the bullet velocity sit? How is the damage per mag, which essentially equates to downs per mag, and a lot of these different variables. Are you playing solo? Are you playing in quads? That's all updated, and there's a link to the spreadsheet in the description. So here we kind of have the various different weapons ranked, similar to kind of how we did it with the close range meta video, where we include GG's AI, COD Munity, Warzone stats, True Game Data's meta gen is now updated, and then I go ahead and kind of plug those in as an average, and then I just rank those accordingly. And then obviously I put in my own based off some that they may have missed, or maybe something's going on where they're not including them. And that'll be including the Raal and the LR762. There's plenty of good snipers right now, but this one is probably the all-around best, and we'll go ahead and kind of dive through that. The GPR, I personally think it's a solid option, but I still prefer the XM4. And you can tend to see these two damage drop-offs. So we got the furthest damage drop-off, which is always going to be important for long-range TTK, but sometimes even more important is the damage drop-off before that, especially within the game with all the visual shake. Maybe you're not challenging someone at 70 or 80 meters. Maybe you're more likely to challenge them at 45 to 50 meters, and then these closer range TTKs come into question on kind of where those are at. And they might even be more important in the future to include the third, because those damage drop-offs are much closer. It'll be less than this number. As soon as 43 meters hits, that's when we're going to go ahead and kick in to this longer TTK. All around is kind of a good option. XM4, I think it kind of edges out the GPR, especially with the new stock. We're talking about 5 attachment builds, 6, 7, 8 attachment builds. Might be able to power creep some of these to solve for some of their recoil. And generally, a lot of these are just going to be low recoil overall. Then we get the Model L, which I think is a little bit under the radar right now. I think because it has a 50 round mag and is a little bit slower fire rate, people are kind of avoiding it. But overall, its TTK and bullet velocity are pretty solid. The Krig C, it does have a 70 default mag, but its recoil has this sharp turn after 15 bullets, which is similar with the Ames. So I can see why people are avoiding those. AK-74 probably has the most recoil. It's super bouncy, and you'll see it when we go ahead and talk a little bit about it. It's a little bit more noticeable, the visual shake, how aggressive it is. And then obviously it has recoil on top of that. So it ends up making it feel way worse, even though the bullet velocity is right around the 900. If they bumped up the bullet velocity with a lot of these weapons and remove some of the visual recoil, it'd be a little bit more of a balanced meta where you wouldn't really feel like so many people were gravitating towards snipers, and it'd be a little bit more of a balance. Keeping in mind that in Warzone 1, the bullet velocities were closer to 1400 for almost all the meta weapons, except for the AMAX. It was a little bit lower because it just didn't have that much bullet velocity and a little bit slower fire rate. This is nowhere close to 1400. The DTIR, probably one of the best, if not the best, from MW3 for the long-range meta. And then the XMG is the only LMG from BO6 that people seem to be using. They rated it kind of low. I think it's easily, when I picked this up of floor loot, it is already one of the lowest recoils. It just has LMG movement and LMG reload, which aggressive players don't tend to like. But this is good for a little bit more methodical player. You combine this with a good sniper support style SMG that's pretty versatile, like the PP919, you're going to end up in a really good spot, I think, with the XMG. Then the Raal, which is currently broken at the moment. I say broken in an insanely fast, easy to use way. It does a lot of visual shake, but the insane damage makes up for that. You can see it has pretty insane TTK, 625 up to about 53 meters, and that's without using any kind of barrels or anything like that. And then the LR762 It has a one-shot range up to 86 meters when you use the long barrel. And that's kind of the problem currently with the meta, is a lot of these become hard to use because of the visual recoil, as well as the bullet velocity. It's not really allowing you to compete beyond around 55, 60 meters. So those 20 meters give snipers free reign to be confident, knowing that you're not going to probably gun them unless you're mounted or you're team shooting or you're just super good at the game. You're not really going to put a lot of fear into snipers' minds when they can just one-shot tap you at that range and have better bullet velocity than at that range. Breeze through these. Luckily, they've simplified the loadout. So a lot of these are very similar. Obviously, on the older guns, they've kind of simplified them so you can really pick whatever attachment that you're trying to solve for that specific stat. LR here, pretty straightforward build. There's not a lot of workarounds with that. You could probably change a few things to speed it up. But like I said, there's multiple snipers you can use. I just want to include one in the long range meta because it's clear that a lot of people are sniping. Target laser is going to help with a lot of that idle sway that you're getting on the gun. And I'll talk a little bit about the firing range because some people are like, oh, it's bugged or whatever. That's just kind of how the firing range has always worked. But we'll go ahead and give you a couple examples. Then we got the Raal, which is pretty much set up like this. With the conversion kit, and then what will end up happening is you have to put in semi-auto to change the damage profile and the rate of fire, which I'll also show. So when we look at the Raal, if we just keep it in full auto, it has a pretty fast fire rate, but that's not how you want to use it. You're going to go ahead and tab it over to semi-auto, and then the fastest you can fire it, it does have a little bit of gain and a little bit of shake, but overall, it kind of keeps a straight path. And it has a better bullet velocity than some of the other options. So here's the sniper. This dummy will tell you kind of when you have a one-shot range. If it says 299, that is a one-shot kill. So boom, we get the one shot. It says 299 on the top left. That is a one-shot kill. We kill it. It moves down the line. Damage drop off is around 85 meters. It does 85 plus 4. That bumps us up to 89. So if we get a headshot here, it's not going to be a one-shot kill. It comes up at 299. You would have been looking for 299 if you were looking for a one-shot kill. So that's kind of how that one works. It still has the idle sway, but it gives you a little bit of a second before it gets all kinds of wonky. If we go ahead and line it up on the target, you can see before it starts moving, and then it gets a little bit. So that's kind of how that one's built out. Again, make sure you're doing the semi-auto and you'll be good to go. Like I said, it has that weird wonky recoil. All the builds are going to be very similar to this. Once you get into 8 attachments, maybe you put on recoil springs, you put on more ammunition, maybe you do a suppressor instead of the compensator. It gives you a lot of options. Generally, if you're good enough to get 8 attachment build, you probably don't need to be watching the video. Most of you are going to probably get your 5 attachment overkill build, and that's how you're going to start multi-year loadouts. If you want to go ahead and go from there, there you go. But these are the 5 simplistic builds. Like I said, we got back to Warzone 1 metas, where pretty much the builds are going to be monolithic suppressor, compensator, longest barrel, biggest mag, and the optic. And that's it. You got your 5 attachments, and it keeps it simple. XMG, a little bit different because you don't have to put on a magazine and you can go ahead and put on the stock. So that kind of allows for that. Again, XM4 will probably break the rules because we do have that stock. And we'll kind of see this part. This is what I was talking about, the 15 bullets. When we go ahead and look right here, and whoop, it does that harsh turn. So as long as you're aware of that, you'll be able to adjust because the recoil after that isn't particularly extreme. And then we have the XMG, which I think is one of the straighter shooting guns. You kind of just I'm trying to shoot in between these targets. And it kind of goes that. Obviously a little bit of visual shake, but overall it's one of those things that you'll be able to manage the recoil. It just goes up and to the left. Not very particularly aggressive, and you just hold it in the one spot and it won't move. We'll have a lot of visual shake. You got to contend with that, but that's just kind of how the game is built. AK-74 and then the DTIR. Somehow it says level 1, even though I know I've max leveled and I got camos for it. So another bug, shocker. Or AK-74 built out pretty much the same that we've talked about. The DTIR is a little bit different. Basically, it doesn't matter what muzzle you use as long as it's doing the same stat. Which on here, if we go through here, it's solving for 15% recoil, 15% recoil, 15% recoil. And that's kind of what we're solving for. That's pretty much, the rest are cosmetic. They've simplified the loadout that way. 40 mag, rifle stock. And this one ends up having less recoil than you'd expect for the DTIR. You're still able to shoot pretty straight. Has a little bit of bounciness, but that's just visual recoil. The actual recoil pattern's not that bad. And the rate of fire is a little bit slower too. And this one gets a little bit bouncy on the AK. You can still manage the recoil, but the visual, and then it does a little bit of that. So you can see it changes direction, a harsh change of direction there, and then mostly not after that. So as long as you're really aware of that, after about, what is that, 10 or 12 shots, you just adjust, and then you can kind of hold the trigger in the one spot and it'll be useful. But if that ends up being a problem for you, then, you know, maybe you got to stick to another gun that doesn't really have as harsh of a swap there. Then we get into the Model L, which I think is a little bit underrated. You know, it's sad that it only has a 50 round mag. And then the Krig C. Again, pretty similar build. That's the biggest mag we could put on it. And it is only 50. So sad there. And then the Krig pretty much built out the same. And it gets the default 70 with the extended mag too, which is kind of nice. Again, Model L, a little bit slower fire rate, but it kind of does what it's supposed to. And then you got to reload quite often. That one also has that little janky 15 shots, and then it goes to the side. You can see it pulled right. You don't notice it much, obviously. Here it's easy to adjust, but as soon as you get about 15 shots, whoop, it does that turn up. And then you can see how the recoil right there, it gets a little bit more aggressive to go vertical. So that's why I think this one will generally be a little bit harder if you're not killing them in that first burst. So it goes down and then it goes to the right, I'm adjusting, and then it goes vertical. You can do it. Obviously, if this is like your Krig main, it kills fast enough, but you would just have to get really good at making sure that you can adjust for that, because at further ranges, that's when it's going to be more noticeable. Where your crosshairs jump a couple inches, not so bad on here. At 80 to 100 meters or even 60 meters, 50 meters, can become an issue where you're missing a few of those shots, more than you probably need to. And that's going to bring us to the top two current guns, which is the XM4 and the GPR. I think I prefer the XM4, especially after the buff with this stock that's only equipable to it. The XMG and the DM10, that helps. And then we have the GPR, which again is built out pretty much kind of how we're used to. If you want to use a lower zoom optic, you definitely can. But this one's just one that I think a lot of people like. That fire rate feels good. A little bit under 800. If you feel like you miss, you can get back on target. XM4 works pretty good. Even at the further ranges, it'll allow you to hit those shots. And just kind of be aware. If you really want to learn a recoil pattern of a weapon, just go to the range, see what it does. You can see that one doesn't do too much, and this one doesn't do too much with the build. So that's them head to head. They're both pretty consistent. Just one goes up in the left, one up and to the right. Hopefully you found the video helpful. Appreciate the support. Thank you for watching as always. Have a great day.